Hello, this is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm chatting with Raphael Paulin-Daigle. Raphael is the founder and CEO of Splitbase, a CRO agency that works with major D2C and e-commerce brands to improve conversion rates, revenue, and customer experience. In this conversation, we talk about the differences between stated preferences and revealed preferences, basically what people say and what people do in consumer behavior, and how you can bridge the gap in your customer understanding through conversion rate optimization. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Raphael. Podcast-wise, anything you want to touch on? Any like hobby horses, hot takes, any topics that you definitely want to explore in this one?
There's a lot of things. I'm open to kind of anything, right? There's a lot of things I'd love to talk about, but I'm like, at this point, have I talked about that too much? Probably not. I mean, they're all different podcasts, I guess. I love to talk about customer research. It's definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about. Just qualitative research, and using voice of customer to build landing pages and just build a CRO program around that. I love to chat about that. Anything landing pages, even like advertorials for D2C brands, like for e-commerce, it doesn't need to be D2C, but the modern take on how do you do a listicle or an advertorial that does not look like it's a spammy affiliate thing from the 2000s, right? How can modern brands take that those pieces of content and use them as landing pages that can work pretty well. I love to chat about that. Just CRO program in general, open to pretty much anything.
Cool. I want to maybe use this for the actual podcast discussion. What are some boring topics that you think we shouldn't talk about? Like, what are you tired of talking about in the CRO space?
There's a lot of things that just bores me to death, like attribution.
Why does attribution bore you to death?
I don't know. I feel like no one can agree on anything. I feel like it is like, it's ridiculous. I feel like it's not that it bores me. It's, it's interesting. It's like the one thing I feel like in the marketing world that over the years, no one's ever been able to agree on. And yet, we see clients of various sizes. We see Fortune 100 companies investing ridiculous sums in finding out the perfect attribution model, paying fancy software. And then the next day you've got someone else coming in and says, that's bullshit. That's useless. And I kind of feel like we've reached this point where it's like, is this a space that's just been overcomplicated? Well, definitely. But where's the point of diminishing returns? It's just a topic that, to be honest with you, the more I get to learn about, and I've been in the space for 8-10 years at this point. I feel like I'm not more clear on attribution as I was many years ago. And then everything, as soon as people think they have it figured out, then Facebook or Google changes everything, fucks everything up, and then people claim to have solutions, but are they really the right solutions? Are they really the accurate solutions? Can you actually trust people that are just trying to sell you a tool and claims that it works? I don't know, right? Like, that's kind of where, I don't know. I have a lot of conflicting thoughts and opinions about it. So does it bore me to death? No, it doesn't bore me to death. I'm just a bit tired of it.
I've personally,
maybe I should just be more curious, about it at this point, but it's just,
I think it's a little bit of intellectual masturbation, so to speak, because I think like there's so many layers of complexity with both the organizational and decision-making aspects, as well as the technical limitations on it. But in my point of view, I don't think I've ever seen a company actually make better decisions by spending more time thinking about their attribution model or changing models or trying to get more complex. I've never seen meaningful decisions being made from those changes.
Absolutely.
I'm like, what's the point of an attribution model in the first place, right?
I absolutely agree. And I think that's why just like I did not expect to talk so much about that. See, and it's just funny. You got me started. No, you said it well. Intellectual masturbation.
Okay, so another hobby horse maybe on the CRO space. Can you give me a true or false on this one? True or false? Conversion rate optimization is just a glorified synonym for A/B testing.
False.
How come?
I mean, I fight this every single day, with potential clients, with people that are like, hey, we're A/B testing. We're doing CRO. And I'm like, no, you're not doing shit. You install the testing tool, you're testing whatever Neil Patel tells you to test on his blog, and you call that conversion optimization. And now you're telling me that's not working for you. No surprise. I mean, no, for me, conversion optimization, or I should say, sorry, for me, A/B testing is a tool that we use as part of conversion optimization, but it does not stop there. To me, conversion optimization is about how can we make an experience more aligned with the customer, which in return will likely lead to positive outcomes like conversion rate increases or, whatever goal you're trying to get, right? More money at the end of the day. It's everyone's goals. But I hate this word because it really comes from like the Fortune 500 clients that we work with, and I feel like it's such a buzzword. But customer centricity, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's what conversion optimization is about. How do we deliver better experiences that leads to more favorable outcomes for both the brand and the customer, and everybody wins at the end of the day. So if you're telling me that A/B testing alone, like installing Google Optimize on its own will just do that, obviously I don't believe you, because that's not what it does. It's as much of a tool like HTML is a tool to build software. Well, not even software, but just, things. Yeah, it's a tool. You can't do anything without other things.
You mentioned, or you emphasized customer centricity, but alluded to the fact that has to align with business goals as well.
Yeah.
Is there a time when those things are misaligned, when something is bad for the customer experience, when people don't like what you're doing, but the data shows that it works? That's something that actually yesterday I talked to Mark Schaefer on the podcast, and he had mentioned there's sometimes a bifurcation between, like what the customer wants and what actually works. And his point is like, do what the customer wants. Like even if it seems to work, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think I do have a mixed opinion on this, whereas the customer doesn't always, that's the thing, right? For example, let's say, and I'll explain where I'm going with this, but let's say you're running like usability test, right? And you're getting users, remote or not, to kind of go through your site experience. And at one point you see that they're really, really struggling, but then you survey them at the end of that test and you ask them, was there anything difficult or whatever about your experience? Probably not the best question, but so you survey them. And very often you'll notice that you've seen that people visually struggled with maybe a step during checkout, but then they'll tell you in the feedback that no, everything was great. So something happened that, they struggled. They didn't even realize that they've struggled, maybe just because they're used to shitty web experiences. I don't know. But then they told you the opposite of what actually happened. So, the reason I'm talking about this is because the customer doesn't always know how they're going to act and what they need in order to act and what they actually want. And I think it is our job as marketers to understand what is, the conscious needs and wants of the customer, but also those subconscious needs. Now, so there is a line between what the customer says they wants and what the customer says they need and what they actually need. I think where the line needs to get drawn is when we fall into dark patterns, right? Deception, anything like that. Obviously, it's a big no-no. Tricks, fine prints, obviously that is not just, going for the business goals. That is pure deception. It's going to bite you in the ass, either legally or on a customer service perspective or just public opinion perspective. My ethics don't align with using dark patterns or any type of deception. So I'm also against that just as a whole, same with split base as a whole. But yeah, I do think there is a fine line between, I think that is our job. It's understanding the conscious and the subconscious needs of the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm not a behavioral scientist by trade, but I think that from my reading, what I understand is that the big underpinning of that field is that there's a gulf between people's stated preferences, what they say, and what they do, right? Yeah. And is there a way to bridge that gulf with conversion rate optimization, with research? Like, how do you trust what somebody says if you don't necessarily know if that's what they actually believe? Like in the case of like political races, like a lot of people will say like, oh, I'm going to vote for this, or like, oh, this is what I care about. Then they get to the voting booth and they do something different. So it's like, how do we reconcile that in marketing and optimization?
I think that's the $1 billion question, right? I don't think anyone really has the answer to that. One way that we do it at Splitbase to kind of, and it's not like it doesn't provide a clear answer, but it helps understand those motivations, both the conscious ones and the subconscious ones. Is first, when you survey your customers and you ask them, what makes you want to buy this? What's going on in your life to go through this process? Or you survey existing customers and you ask, what made you buy this? What's important to you about this product? And you ask them questions that generally the answers are going to be the conscious answers, right? The things that the customers know and are aware of.
They're going to say stuff like price and the obvious stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you ask, a range of questions, pre-purchase and post-purchase, right? You will mostly get, the things that they are aware of. But it's interesting to then take those things and then test it at various degrees, right? And I don't have like a specific example for you on that, but it's like, I don't know, let's say, and I'm not going to try to invent an example because I'm totally going to fuck it up. But but at the end of the day, it's like, let's look at what people are saying is important to them. And then let's test it and let's see, is it actually important to them? Actually, a good example is, charity-driven brands. There's so many direct-to-consumer charity-driven brands that are popping up. And I know one of the big question that's been popping up in a lot of the CEOs' minds over the last couple of years is, how important is it to the customers? They're telling us that it's very important to them, and they're buying from us because of the charitable aspect. But if they were to find a better price at a competitor that doesn't have that charitable aspect, would they still buy from us? Would they pay premium just because of our charitable aspect versus the competitor, right? And there's no clear-cut answer to any of the brands. It all depends on the actual charitable aspect to it, how much you advertise it, how much it's part of your UVP, and also who's your customer base. Are they a price-sensitive customer? Are they not, right? But that is a great example of like, customers are saying it's important, but are they just saying that because it makes them feel good to say that they're buying from you for a charitable aspect? Or are they just, and is that actually impacting their purchasing behaviors? And I'll be honest with you, we've tested that a lot of times with brands so they could better align their own brand with it. And for some brands, it made no difference.
You just remove the language around the charitable donations and basically nothing changes.
Well, I wouldn't remove it, but it's question like, how important is it, to the customer? And I would never tell a brand, hey, like this is part of your brand DNA. Stop talking about it or stop doing it because it doesn't help customers buy more. I still think, any brand or company needs to have like a social aspect,
that's one of those
giving,
principles,
whatever.
those underlying motives for being in business in the first place. That's not usually subject to experimentation. Like we're in it to do good stuff. So like we're going to keep doing that.
Exactly. And look, not everything is supposed to make the customers buy more. Like that is the ultimate capitalistic point of view that, I think led to what sometimes people see as bad capitalism, because it's like taking advantage of everything, and it's trying just to do everything for money reasons, and it's the greediness aspect of it, right? Like not everything needs to be to make more money. I mean, if you're building a brand and you want it to, and you're only doing it because that might help conversions, I think and you want to do a charitable aspect thing just so it can help conversion, I think that's a bad reason to do a charitable aspect thing to your brand. Like do it because you care, because it's a charity you want to help, you want to make an impact. Gives more meaning to making money, I think. But if it can help you boost conversions, great. But yeah, we've seen with some brands that it's like it was important and customers appreciated that, but did it really make a meaningful difference in terms of increasing revenue if we advertise it more? Not really. Some other brands it did, though, by the way. Like that's what I'm saying. Right. It really depends on the brand, on the customer, and everything.
I wonder if like the incentive structures that we have based on the data we have available, right? Like if you're running an A/B test, you're running on pretty short-term data within the span of like 2 to 4 weeks, and like the proximate conversion. So not necessarily even like long-term metrics like customer LTV or brand equity. I wonder if like we're incentivized to keep spiraling down that path to try to eke out marginal dollars. And that coupled with dark patterns, I wonder, I don't know if there's even a bad perception of CRO, but like I do think like a lot of people in the space have talked about like, I don't like it, but it works. Yeah. And, you just kind of like follow that thread line, and then you end up doing a bunch of stuff that seems not great for the customer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? I think, sorry, so many thoughts. But I mean, yeah, there can be bad CRO and good CRO. Like that's the thing, right? Like if you approach CRO as like, let's make more money, who cares about the customer and everything? Like you're inevitably going to end up with like fake countdown timers and shit that, is probably not in today's day and age ethical, because they're pure lies, right? Like they're not real. You're applying tactics that are just deceiving customers and creating false scarcity and things like that.
People stop trusting that over time too, right? Like once the secret's out, people look at that as almost a negative, like a red flag. So it's like you're chasing short-term ephemeral gains, if anything.
Yeah. And maybe like that sounds a bit woo, but for me, it's like, look, like if the aim of your CRO program, like I said, is just to create a better experience, a less frustrating internet in a way, right? And like everyone is better off of it. Like if I go to a website and I can't get the answers to my questions about a certain product, I'm frustrated. I have to do comparison shopping. It's complicated. It's taking me so much more longer than I would want. And then the brand is losing because they might not get me as a customer because my questions are unanswered, right? But if you approach CRO like, hey, let's solve customers' problems, let's make things painless for everyone. And by doing that, we're going to be able to increase, whatever business metrics. Great. To me, that's like CRO. That's not just there to gain the business, but it's serving both. It's serving the customer. It's serving the brand as well. And I'd like to think it helps make the internet a better place. I don't know, maybe, but hey, that's what I do for a living. I do CRO. So
let me try to ask like probably a grandiose question and try to wrap this up into something concrete. So I don't know the D2C and e-commerce space as well as I do SaaS. Like our agency focuses on SaaS. We've got a couple D2C clients, but I've found them pretty differentiated product wise. Now, my understanding is that like a lot of product lines kind of converge to be very similar. So you've got Casper, Purple, Tuft & Needle, all these different mattress companies. And a lot of them, their websites even look pretty similar. And like they're probably using the same paid ad agencies and like the same channels. So like there's sort of a sea of sameness, and that happens in SaaS too. Like that's definitely true of like especially MarTech companies. But I wonder, like I have a brand preference for Tuft and Needle, and I wonder like why. You know, I'm like why don't I choose like a cheaper mattress that's probably made from the same manufacturer? And I don't know necessarily how to phrase this, but I'm trying to wonder like is that something that is affected by CRO, or is that a bigger kind of like brand strategy, differentiation strategy, and the CRO team kind of hopes to facilitate that messaging on the website and like hopes to reduce friction to that point? Or like how do you differentiate a D2C brand like that?
Yeah, well, I think it's bigger than CRO. That's for sure. I think that is a brand. It is an ethos. It is a company type of thing, right? Because people buy, from brands for multiple reasons. If we forget just about websites for a second, right? And we just think of like, why Tuft and Needle instead of Casper, and forget about pricing, forget about mattresses. There's probably something somewhere in that journey that resonated more with you, either on a value level, on even just a visual level, or even just in the style of copy, right? That you said, hey, this brand feels like it's more for me, or maybe even in the imagery that they're using, you just relate a bit more to that, or you relate to the aspiration that they're channeling, right? Which is, by the way, for luxury brands, I've studied luxury brands a lot a couple of years ago, and they differentiate, by like what's the DNA that you want to aspire to in a way. Not to get too deep into that, but I think that journey of why you buy from this brand instead of the other one, there's going to be all the logical reasons: price, sizing, whatever, shipping cost. But then there's going to be those subconscious ones that are really hard to put a finger on because people don't even know why they're attracted to one brand more than the other. It's really like an emotional reason. I think with CRO, we can get closer to that and we can facilitate that. So say if we do voice of customer research and we get to understand really how like the words customers are using, how they're talking, what's going on in their lives, right? That's why I love asking the question on customer surveys, what can you tell us about yourself? Instead of asking any type of demographic question. And it's qualitative, right? And then you have to do the manual analysis and everything. But people tend to say things you never would have guessed about them. And just by knowing a bit more about their life situation, who they are, how they talk, you can get closer maybe to that emotional aspect, especially at least in your copy and in your visuals. And I like to think that, you still have to kind of test it. And sometimes it works and maybe sometimes it doesn't. But, you might just get closer to the relatability factor, to the emotional triggers that will get people to buy. So I think optimizers, we can facilitate that, we can help that, but the only way is to truly understand the brand. And even then there's going to be some magic that no one's ever going to know. And I mean, that's just how life works, right? Like we don't know everything about the brain. We can't expect to know everything about how people buy, and why people buy from a specific brand.
CRO and marketing
as close as we can.
It seems like an iterative pursuit towards that magic answer, and like you're never going to arrive at that destination. The best you can hope to do is chip away at it and get closer and closer and eke out incremental progress. But this is maybe wading into hypothetical territory, but like in the customer surveys, so I was thinking like, what would I say with regards to Tuft and Needle? And I think in relation to the other brands, it felt more boring and more stable and less trendy. Like I felt like Casper and Purple were like pumping a bunch of like YouTube ads out, and it felt like, I don't know, is this like a fly-by-night, like flashy, expensive piece of cheap furniture, or is like Tuft and Needle felt more boring? But like then I'm wondering, like, is that like my stated preference or why I actually bought it? So I don't know. Like you get a bunch of answers in these surveys. Why did you buy? Who you are? And I'm sure like there's a lot of commonalities that come up, maybe even things that are trite and banal, price, or like the brand looked nice and stuff like that. And I would guess that like there's some answer that sticks out in a unique way, like it's something that you haven't heard before, and maybe it's only like one or two responses, and you're like, does that cause you to kind of investigate that further and see if you can bring that up and that's a point of differentiation? Like in Mad Men, there was I think first season where they were talking to Lucky Strike, and the whole position, like every tobacco company was positioning similarly. And Don Draper he brings out the pitch and he's like, it's toasted, it's like it's toasted tobacco. And the rest of the Lucky Strike team was like, well, all tobacco is toasted. He's like, yeah, but nobody else is saying it. So I wonder if you're trying to find those secret answers that are maybe true about the category, because you're still a mattress, you're still not differentiated product wise, but that only you are saying because you found that hidden gem.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that is a goal, right? It's what can we do to find those things that sometimes even the brands ignore about themselves that get customers to buy, right? And that's why I think qualitative research and just customer research is so important, because you can't figure it out by being a brand looking at your screen all day. It's just, you'll be looking at your own selves. But when you talk to customers and with an array of surveys and so many things, sometimes you find those little things and it's interesting, and you're like, I wonder if that could help, and we can investigate a little further. It's funny because we're just saying this, and there are still things like that we probably won't be able to change, even though, no, actually, we probably wouldn't even detect it. But like maybe someone who likes the color purple a lot will buy from purple mattresses instead of like, I don't know, maybe someone hates blue or green. So just naturally, there's no other reason. They just felt more compelled to buy from a brand that had brand colors of a color they love. Right. Like there's a lot of like just random stuff like that will happen and will make people buy from a brand more than another. And people will never say, I bought from them because they're purple. But
that's hilarious. I think that's probably true. When you start out with a client, do you have like sort of a playbook regarding qualitative research, or is it like kind of bespoke for each type of client? Do you say like we need winter for message testing, user testing, usability? Like what kind of what's the typical process to pull out some of these qualitative insights?
I always wish we could be doing more. I think we just need to start charging double in order to do everything we'd want to be doing, to be honest with you. Most of our brands are not billion-dollar brands, so we can't charge whatever we want. But we still have a process, and we try to identify what can we do that will lead to the best outcomes in terms of useful insights that will lead to the best and most solid programs and hypotheses, right? We do have a playbook, but it's still a bit custom. For example, with any new client, we're going to be doing, customer surveys, existing customer surveys, right? Which questions are we going to ask? Well, there are some that we're probably going to ask for every single brand, but there's some questions that they're going to be tailored from brand to brand. It depends, what we need to figure out, what we need to find out, from initial analyses, polls, right? We're always going to be doing polls, some more frequently than others. What type
this
of
is like
question
Hotjar and Qualaroo and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like Hotjar is great. And those are, I think, what type of questions, what's the frequency, where do we show those polls? It's all going to depend on the brand, what we don't have the answers to, what the brand doesn't have the answer to, and what we may have predetermined from analytics are the problem areas as well, right? So obviously it is bespoke. It's not just like we come in and it's a plug and play approach. We need to understand where do we focus our time, because we can't be asking every single question in the world on every single page of the site. And obviously we only have so much time, right?
Right. You'd be swimming in data if you did that.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing with like, usability research. Like it's useless to do usability research on like just one landing page most of the time. But if we're optimizing an entire website, that's quite complex. Like obviously it's very useful then. How we're going to conduct those tests is going to be different as well. Right. So the approach definitely changes. The internal fight that I don't want to say fight, but the fight that I have with myself, to be honest, and it's something that I voice at every single leadership meeting with my team, is really, it's like, I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist in the sense that, like I said, I want to do everything. I wish we could do winter testing on every single client and everything in every test. But we don't have the luxury of unlimited time, and we don't have the luxury of unlimited budget with our clients. Our market, the D2C commerce space especially, there's only so much that it can take as well. So I'd love like the CRO program of my dream. We actually have a couple of clients that we're able to do that for, but it's not the majority, right? But it's always custom. Obviously, you need to balance everything. Client needs, what we actually need to get them to drive results, and budget and time, right? I mean, and I think that's true for any agency. I'm sure you can relate to that as well in your industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you get pushback on like the amount of qualitative and customer research you want to do before you start testing? Does any prospect ever say like, fuck the research, just give us the good ideas and like boost our conversion rates?
Oh my God. Yeah.
You love those clients, right?
So, we're not that agency that's going to be there for quantity. If you want like 10 A/B tests launched in a month, we're not even going to promise you a number of A/B tests per month, because we're going to do what we determine is needed for you. We're not going to try to hit quotas of like, oh yeah, we absolutely need 5 A/B tests a month. And then we'll know that 3 of them will never be conclusive because your data just doesn't match with that. Right. So, so sorry, back to your question. We do have clients that are like, oh, well, we could launch more A/B tests, or we could build landing pages faster, or more landing pages if we didn't do the research. But my response to that is, but it will probably take you longer to find one that actually works. Do you want us to just spend way more time building random pages off guesswork and gut feelings and things like that? And you may or may never, it's not what we do. Like, the reason SplitBase has been around for about 7 years or something, or 8 years, I'm losing count. But the reason why SplitBase is successful and we're still around and we have great client results is because of that. It's because of our process. It's because of the research. And, the brands that come to us and they're like, oh, I don't want to do any research. Well, I'm sure there's going to be another optimization agency out there that will be glad to take them on as client. It's on them if the results are driven or not. But if my stamp of approval has to be on it, we need to follow our process. It's really rare. Like, most clients that come to us understand the value of research, of qualitative research, of talking to your customers. So they're already sold on that when they come to us most of the time. So that is not a hard sell. And generally, if they're a bit hesitant when they start seeing the insights that we've been able to get from this qualitative research, then obviously they're changing their minds, because they're like, damn, that is so impressive. That's so useful. Just yesterday, I got a message from one of our optimization managers who said, one of our clients took that survey research and already sent that feedback to their product team, to their social media team. They've passed it on to leadership to see how they could, make changes in the organization that better reflected the customer personas. They started looking at how they could use and test different imagery in their ads, right? Like, that's all unrelated to what we actually do, but that qualitative research informed all those things, right? So I always sell it as like, it's qualitative research. Like, the benefit is beyond CRO and what we're going to do. Like, if you're really smart, you're going to use that across your company. And that's why, back to your very first question, do I see A/B test is A/B testing the same as conversion optimization? This is why I say no, because part of an optimization program that we're running with clients, we're going to run A/B test, but there's also all those that insight generation and that we're working on, the customer discovery aspects of it as well, which may lead to a test, may not lead to a test, but it's still part of the value. It's still part of the optimization of the business that can help them make more money.
Yeah. I think that there's a difference between like motion and momentum, or like what somebody sees as a deliverable is so obvious. And like in your context for CRO, it's like they see the A/B test and you maybe promise like X number per month or something like that. And for us, it's like how many articles we're producing. But if you just like, and sometimes people will ask us for this, they're like, we have a list of keywords. Our past SEO agency gave us these 2,000 keywords. It's always like some keyword dump that has no prioritization, obviously. And they just wanted to write, just to produce, just to get the deliverables out. And it's been hard to communicate the value of strategy, because it's like, we could get motion, but we're not going to get momentum. We're not going to accomplish your goal. A lot of that comes from the strategy and figuring out like what strengths we can index on, what your biggest problem areas are, what your weaknesses are that we're going to have to overcome. And all of that comes from a little bit of research in the beginning, so we can actually point you in the right direction. But it's hard to communicate that. I think like maybe there's some people in-house who like have a greater degree of like strategic insight, and they say like, hey, we really, our checkout is fucked. Like we really need help there, and they can point you in that right direction. Or sometimes we'll have like good CMOs or VPs who like know content. And they're like, we know we need to like sculpt this topic area.
They're so convinced.
Well, I think they can be helpful if they have some level of expertise in that area. But I still think like there's a lot of value. Like they're clearly coming to an agency because there's some pain point. Something's not working, or it's not working optimally. So it's like letting go some of the reins and letting the agency do some of that research and strategy, even though it's not as like tangible. It's like the value of intelligence and research gathering, like you said, can be flooded to so many other programs in the company.
Yeah.
But it's hard to communicate that just because it's not as visible.
Yeah. And I still think like one of the biggest challenges with the CRO space as a whole is still around education, right? Where like for so many years, it's been marketed as you run an A/B test, and then you run this like thing that this random blogger online says that's going to help you it's going to increase conversions. And then it's as simple as like, you set it up in a testing tool, drag and drop, you launch a test and you get results. When it should really be seen as content marketing or SEO, right? It is a longer term strategy. You build off your insights, you iterate. It is a bit like science, And yet so many people still see CRO as something that needs to be like a very clear, defined deliverable, like a piece of paper. It's like a test. But the thing is, like, the value of a program doesn't come in the number of tests you get. It's like there are some clear things about an optimization program that you can put a number on, but there's also a lot of things that are less, like, you just really need to get it to understand how that brings value to the business. And for a lot of brands that are new to optimization, it's stuff that sometimes it's really hard to get them to see that. And sometimes you just can't, right? Like it is what it is. And let's not forget that there's still always luck out there, right? There has been people who ran a couple A/B tests with no strategy whatsoever, and somehow they just got really lucky and they got really great wins. Now, if we look under the hood, very often those wins are not actually statistically sound. So, you got to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. But it's like, I'll just take our own agency, right? Sometimes like we start with a new client and literally from the get-go, you get three wins in a row. And like we did our research, obviously that was great, but like that is not the norm. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we always get wins like that. Like, there are stats out there of like how many, I don't know what's like the updated. I feel like I have the stats from many, many years ago. Was like what only 1 out of 7 A/B tests usually wins. I think that's like the industry standard, right? There are still companies that are like, oh, only 1 out of 7 should fail. But it's just not how it works, right? And no
you're
matter
running obvious
your level,
stuff if that's your win rate, right? Like then maybe you should stop testing and just
totally
ship stuff.
That's the thing. Like, I can come to a client and say, hey, well, I can test this for you. It will very likely be a win.
We're fixing a broken thing. Like,
exactly. Let's fix something
it.
and it's going to give you a win. Is that going to help you move the needle? Right. So I think, education is always, and it's funny because Twitter is also helping, but not helping. Like you and I, come back from when CRO, for e-commerce, it was like the bigger brands would be doing it, right? Like it was before D2C existed. Now D2C started existing, like 2-3 years ago. And then there's like D2C Twitter that started, appearing. And then the what happened with SEO way back in the days of like everyone with their little tricks and techniques and whatever is happening with CRO again. It's like a second renewal to CRO. It's weird. But it's like people are sharing what worked for them on Twitter, or like they're sharing test results, but the sample sizes aren't right. And everyone is freaking out on like, oh, wow, that's so great. I'm going to test that. But, there's no strategy. There's no thought behind, why you're testing what. And it is just that like hype culture of experimentation without actually understanding experimentation, which it has to start somewhere. Like, I think it's a good thing. I'm actually very excited by this, but sometimes I also get very depressed by, just seeing like so many people sharing bad advice when they think they know so much about experimentation, and whatever worked for them will probably work for others. And you see those brands on Twitter just showing off their wins, and you're like, oh my God, I just can't solve all world problems when it comes to CRO. But I will sit here and be like, I guess it is what it is, right?
I personally, I feel like Twitter is frying my brain in some ways. Like I used to, especially back at CXL, but like up until a couple of years ago, I would read like academic papers and like books on evolutionary theory and like all these like deep texts and like try to apply those to my like, whether it was like my jobs in experimentation or my agency in content marketing. And now I feel like I have no attention span for that type of thing. And I'm actually reading a lot of these threads that are just designed for engagement and LinkedIn posts and like quick pithy bits that are easier to digest. And I actually feel like it is kind of like ruining my ability to think deeper and come up with more original ideas by reading those deeper texts. I don't know. Yeah. Something I've noticed in the last couple of years with myself.
I feel you. I'm glad you're saying that, because I realized, back in the days, we had those like, and I guess they still exist, but really, really long. I mean, you wrote a bunch, I wrote a bunch, like those skyscraper, ridiculous guides on everything that were so in-depth on everything. And today I feel like the era of that content is maybe a bit gone. Like maybe now it's like shorter. Even the stuff we write on splitbase.com, like the blog posts are much shorter than before. They're still very actionable, but like people don't have as much attention span. And maybe I'm generalizing here, but I'm like you. I feel like I have a hard time going through an entire massive blog post unless it's like a book, compared to before, where like I would actually sit down, read like entire things. And now like I expect things to be actionable and be brought up faster. And it's not good, but something, I guess just, I don't know. There's no answer to this, but it kind of saddens me that, I'm just like you. I'm noticing, I feel like my attention span is not what it used to be when it comes to these things.
I wonder if there's a devil's advocate point to be made there, where it's like people, because of algorithms and because of the incentive structures on these platforms, are simply getting better at copywriting it and better at facilitating a fast transfer of information. Yeah. I don't think that's true. I think like when I would read long books like Thinking Fast and Slow, they were frustrating and tedious, and I would have to like bring a bunch of willpower to push through. But I ended up not just taking the points away, what was the heuristic, where essentially like if you own a coffee cup, like it's more valuable to you when you give it away, like all those things, like you can kind of memorize the thumbnail image of those points. But I think like absorbing all of the nuance actually helps you contextualize it. And I think maybe that's what's missing in these fast transfers of information, the quick bits on Twitter and whatnot. But I don't know. I'm trying to devil's advocate it and say like maybe it could be good too, but I'm not sure that I believe that.
Well, I'm with you. Like, I wish I would have more attention span, but at the same time, if I can get to the point a little faster for a lot of things, I'm not complaining. I like it when I don't know. I guess both can be good, right? Like, I love those very simple action items. Here's exactly what you need to do, and there's no fluff, and it doesn't go too deep, but it just explains you what needs to be done. Those are very useful in a lot of cases. For some cases, it's less useful, right? And I think that balance yeah, I don't know what's the answer. Like, where does that balance lie? I don't know. I'm lucky, but
the way that I personally have started doing it, because I used to write only long form content. I really didn't spend a lot of time on Twitter. I don't remember writing a LinkedIn post until like a year ago. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But the way I do it is I think in long form. So like the way I do podcasts is always long form. I'm very bad at like getting to the point in 10 minutes. When I write about content marketing, when I'm coming up with new frameworks, I have to write a 5,000 word blog post. I've tried other ways. There's no other way that I can learn it myself. But then like I try to like, I know that maybe 100 people are going to read that. So then I try to think like, how can I distribute this and get maybe like the pithier, quicker points into people's hands as well? Yes. And that's where I start repurposing and ship it off for Twitter, put it in like a videogram or like a LinkedIn or something. And then I hope that a couple psychopaths, a couple masochists will actually come and read that entire post. But I still have to start my process of content creation that way, even if the eventual distribution channels are emerging and changing. And I'm like changing how I like get eyes on it in the first place. That's kind of how I've reconciled with it.
I like that. I mean, you know, when I read a Twitter thread, well, that's a tongue twister. You know, I kind of do the same. I kind of write it as a blog post first, almost like a mini blog post, and then I cut it up. Right. Yeah, good strategy.
So I know like in back in the day, you would write posts for CXL, and like I think you actually like acquired quite a few clients from some of these blog posts. So given that channel may be like diminishing, at least in its reach, like how are you thinking about client acquisition nowadays?
Yeah, good point. So a couple things. I'm less focused on quantity than quality, and I'm also less focused on blog posts and written content than other out of the box ways of maybe getting customers. So a couple examples of that. I mean, and for the record, I'm still valuing written content and blogs a ton. Like we have a couple blog posts a month going out the door, which we stopped for a long time and only restarted as I'm getting a bit more time to work on our marketing in like the last month or so. And I'm still behind on schedule, but you know, I like to use the blog and the written content as a way to kind of answer a lot of questions that people get or like, or ask us, you know, as an agency or ask me around CRO or quizzes. So I use it as a way to answer questions or, you know, yeah. So less, you know, it's more short form than before for sure. It's a bit more straight to the point. The deeper stuff, I prefer to do like a podcast like this. I love doing podcasts, and I think it's great because you can then cut it up in, I mean, you can repurpose it in pretty much anything. So I have the podcast as well that I do on and off. I need to be more consistent at it, but that for us has been tremendously helpful. And then most of my time actually goes on stranger, more out of the box effort. So for example, we just released a swipe file. So it's the D2C swipes on splitbase.com. And it's literally a collection of thousands of landing pages, PDPs, carts, you know, e-commerce elements from direct to consumer brands from across the world. And you can, you know, filter by mobile, desktop, landing page, or, you know, you can filter by industry. And it was a tool that we wanted to use for us, that we had built internally as a Google Drive, and just said, let's put it online, let's make it free. And, you know, hopefully that can maybe give us some SEO juice. I'm not sure, but it's not even the point. The point is, let's create something useful that will get people to know Splitbase for a different reason that's still connected to what we do. But it'll get people to come to our site for, you know, maybe a bit more frequently. So like the swipe file was one of the content marketing pieces we did. Or I remember a couple of years ago, that was one of the best things we did. It was just this one blog post, but it's not even a blog post. Like we had to code everything from scratch. And it was like 10 mobile landing page examples reviewed. And we did a teardown of like 10 mobile landing pages. And you had like the screenshot of the pages, you had like little bubbles on the side with like Raph's tips. And then you actually had like annotations on each of those screenshots with the text next to it that said, you know, that highlighted the good and the bad from our heuristic point of view, right? So that was a piece of content that obviously took longer to build than a blog post, but it also generated way more revenue for us and helped us, in many more ways than a couple blog posts. But like I said, they're all part of a strategy. They're all important. And they all link to each other. And a lot of people come to us because of our blog posts as well. So but that's kind of how I'm thinking about content marketing. The majority of our business still comes from word of mouth and referrals. So we're not spending like an insane amount of time on marketing for ourselves, even though I want to do more, but I only have so much time.
I think that integrated component is interesting because it's like they're all kind of forms of content marketing. And you made me think like about our own approach, which like you mentioned the podcast. The podcast is a really good way to build trust. It's not a good way to get distribution or attention in the first place, but then that social and like short form stuff's great for attention. Yeah. Doesn't do much for like long lasting brand equity. And then search and content on the blog still acts as a great capture for like existing demand where you actually answer questions that you can already see through keyword research. Yeah. And especially if you can do bottom funnel stuff, like we rank for best content marketing agencies and stuff like that. And that's going to capture a certain percentage of people who are in our market. So it's like all of those things fit together. They're disparate, but they fit together in the same kind of cohesive plan. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Just different pieces for different parts of the funnel. And they'll work together.
How long have you been working on SplitBase?
So I kind of lost track of time. I think it's been 7 years. Way back in the days, I used to do SaaS. But to me, like it wasn't really SplitBase until we did e-commerce. Mm-hmm. When did that start and stop? I don't even remember, but I think it's been a good 7 years or so. If not 8. Yeah.
What was it about CRO?
In 2022? I started in CRO in 2012. And I think I started SplitBase like 3 years later. So
that's good longevity. What attracted you about CRO in the first place? And like, if you weren't doing CRO, what would you be doing?
Okay. So first question, I think I've always been a marketing person. I love marketing, but I also I'm a bit more of a visionary person. So I think I could have been great in advertising, but I don't know. I just don't get any satisfaction. Like I love just. Sorry, this is a hard question. There's so much I love about CRO. I love, like, even as a business, right? I'm enjoying now that SplitBase is a bit more mature, way more than when we were getting started. There are some people that like the starting stages of the business more than the growth stages. I like the optimization and the growth stages. And that's why I think I like conversion optimization, because it's not about starting something from scratch. It's about, here's everything. Here's the vision. How do we optimize this to get to that vision, right? And that's what I really enjoy doing. I like problem solving, but I also like having some resources at my disposal. And I think that's why I love CRO so much. I hate anything too technical, like even just being in Facebook Ads Manager or Google Ads. To me, it's just too much small detail thinking. It's too strategic in a way, for lack of better words, but it's just not how I think, right? I feel like CRO for me is like a good balance of creativity, of strategy, problem solving with a lot of things. It's a good balance of everything. I just kind of really like it for that. But yeah, if I wouldn't be doing CRO, I don't know, man. At some point I thought I'd be, like a web designer, but I don't know if I would have the patience to always do that. I need a bit more, like I need the strategy and problem solving a bit more. Although you do that when you're a designer. I almost feel like I'd be an interior designer. I don't know why. Like I just love spaces, environments, materials, visuals, design, feelings created by spaces. It's completely unrelated, but
that sounds incredibly related to landing page optimization to me.
Yeah, well, probably in a lot of ways, but yeah, I always enjoyed architecture and all of that. So I'd probably be in that field or something.
That's awesome. We're at time, but do you have time for like one more quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. If you could give one tip to content marketers, like a piece of advice that maybe they could learn from conversion rate optimization and the mindset they're in, what would that be?
Very simple. Before you start writing anything for your customer, try to understand your customer. I still think, like, to this day, content marketing is a bit like CRO in the sense that a lot of people think, oh, if I create content, I will get customers. It's not how it works, right? Your content must speak to people, solve an actual problem, need, or question that customers are having. And it needs to be relatable to your target customer. And if you don't understand who you're writing for, it's never going to be relevant. It's never going to attract customers. It's not going to get people to stick around, and nobody's going to care. So your piece of content will just be one more page on the internet that's going to do nothing for your business. So yeah, customer research, as much as it's important for CRO, it's as important for content marketing and pretty much everything all around.
I like it. Where can people find you online?
So splitbase.com is really where I post most of our content and everything. LinkedIn, I don't really post that much, but I'm there. Or Twitter. I have peaks and valleys I post many times a day. And then sometimes I just get burnt out by Twitter and then I don't post for a little while. But I still love Twitter. Like I have this love and hate relationship with it. It's probably the best way to interact with me overall, though. So Paulin-Daigle. You probably need to look at the show notes to actually know how that's spelled out. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Alex. That was great.